So welcome to this session on understanding AI in the classroom. My name is Emma Pass. I think I should start with a big caveat that says I am not necessarily an expert in artificial intelligence. I don't work in artificial intelligence, but I am an EdTech consultant very interested in artificial intelligence. I've been using it for a couple of years in various ways in my classroom, and I follow it and I try to learn as much as I can about it. So if you have a question that I don't know the answer to, like Pam said, we'll do some Googling and we'll see if we can find that answer for you. I'm also a teacher myself. I teach 7th grade language arts. I teach at a hybrid school. So I teach partially in person and I teach partially online. So using technology is a big part of my job, and actually wrote a book called The Hybrid Teacher. I have a website and a blog and some social media links that I can give to you at the end if you're interested in connecting with me or learning more about my work afterwards. So a little bit about what this hour is going to look like. I'm going to first start by just talking about what is artificial intelligence, what is AI, what our approach to it is, and what our approach to it should be as educators. Then we'll talk about some specific AI tools, starting with chatbots. Then we'll talk about image tools, and then a various spattering of AI that's infused into some of the EdTech tools that you're probably already using in the classroom. And then hopefully we'll have time to just look a little bit at where we might be going in the future. My hope is if you're sitting in front of your computer, you'll have a little bit of time to play with some of this AI yourself, do some hands-on work. Again, if you're driving or if you're watching back later, definitely kind of take it however you'd like to take it today. So let's start with what is AI. It is projected that AI is going to be a $15.7 trillion with a T, trillion-dollar industry by 2030. It is already and becoming an enormous part of how our society functions. And if you are coming to this session thinking that you have very little experience with AI, chances are you have more experience than you think. Your smart speakers like Siri on your phone, your Alexa, Google Homes, those are all artificial intelligence. Your spell check on your phone when you're text messaging or when you're getting an autocorrect on an online document uses artificial intelligence. And even the algorithms that we use for Netflix or Hulu when they're recommending shows to you, or when your Spotify is creating a personalized playlist, uses artificial intelligence. So AI is already all around us. It is just the term we use when we talk about a machine that is learning based on data that's provided to it. And that might be a huge amount of data, like we'll look at with ChatGPT in a moment, or it might be with a really small amount of data, like the shows you're watching on Netflix. And then the computer program is going to make decisions or give outputs based on that data that it's being fed. Generally, the more it's used, the smarter it gets. Especially the more you use it, the better it gets at knowing who you are and what you want it to do. And that is just kind of the very simplified version of what AI is. I heard a quote recently, thinking back to, okay, like AI is already here and it's not going away anytime soon. We're going to be kind of inundated with AI in the next handful of years. I heard this great quote recently that said, you won't lose your job to AI, you'll lose it to somebody who's using AI. So I think it's really important, number one, not to feed into this fear factor that robots are going to take over the world, because as we'll talk about today, I think there are a lot of really uniquely human skills that are still needed. But AI is really, really smart and helpful. So being able to use it in your work is going to become more beneficial, and it's going to make you more competitive in the job market. So that already bridges us into this first concept, which is, do we fight AI or do we kind of flow with it and go with it? And I'm going to talk a little bit about both, but I love the analogy of the calculator. I kind of have this feeling that I'm in education in a very similar moment to the moment that the calculator was introduced and everybody was like, oh no, we'll never need to know math again. But of course, here we are all these years later, and we still teach math, and sometimes we use the calculator and sometimes we don't. And I think that will be the same with AI, and we have to kind of distinguish and differentiate when are the moments to push back against it and say, hey, we can't use it in this instance for this reason. And some instances we're saying, hey, this is actually a really helpful tool. Not only should we use it, we should learn how to use it really well. So starting with some reasons to maybe push back against it. I think in all of the thinking I've done, talking I've done, and reading I've done on the subject, most people still agree that producing original writing and producing original works and creations are still valuable skills, right? Just because you can drive through McDonald's and get a meal, it doesn't mean you're never going to cook food again, because being able to cook your own food is still a valuable skill. And there's a lot of value in knowing how to do that, even if you're getting drive-through for certain instances when it's convenient. So if we want our students to still be creating and writing original work, there's definitely going to be some shifts in education to make sure they're doing that. Obviously, in first and second grade, it's probably less of an issue looking at students like cheating and plagiarizing, but perhaps some of you listening or watching back later are teaching middle school or high school like I am, where it's a very real possibility that your students are going to be using AI and AI chatbots in particular to try and do some work. So the first switch that I've already made is that any assessed piece of writing that I have my students do, I now make sure they're doing it in the classroom. So I'm no longer assigning an essay due at the end of the week for them to do at home on their own time. That's all done in the classroom. I usually block an hour off for an in-class written essay so that I can make sure that the students are actually producing their own writing, because writing is still a valuable skill. It helps us learn how to think, and it helps us learn how to organize our thoughts. And I still want my students producing their own writing. So making sure that that writing is done in class and that I'm monitoring it. Typically, I have a pretty small class. I can walk around the classroom and just monitor their work. Some people might have access to a computer monitoring program like GoGuardian, where they can see all their students' screens and make sure that they're staying on the document that they're supposed to be writing on. But if it's really an issue, you can always go to pen and paper. I would still recommend that be done in class, because a student could produce a piece of writing on AI and copy it on a piece of paper. But having that writing done in class. The other thing I'm going more and more to is discussion-based assessment. So again, I want students to be able to figure their thoughts out and figure out how to organize their thoughts, but that doesn't always have to be done pen to paper. We can always have discussion-based assessments, and I can hear their thinking as well. Yeah. Another thing to consider when we're kind of talking about pushing back on AI or ChatGPT, a lot of districts have currently moved immediately to blocking some of these tools and just saying, hey, we can't use these tools, is the equity component. Because if an AI tool is blocked on all school computers, that's really only blocking the kids who have access to school computers, right? There are lots of kids at home who have access to a personal device, and they can still access that on their personal device. So it's definitely an issue of equity. And another quote I heard somebody say recently about blocking ChatGPT and AI is that criminalizing a behavior that is inevitable is just creating criminals. I really do think the use of AI in our everyday life is a reality and an inevitability that's going to become more and more apparent in the coming years. So instead of blocking it, thinking about how we can work with it and learn how to use it for good in the classroom. So we'll spend the rest of the session talking about how to flow with AI, how to use it as teachers to save ourselves some time and energy, and then how we might use it with our students and teach them to use it. Before I go any further, I'm just going to check in to see if anybody has any questions or if anybody wants to share. Has anybody started using these tools already?
I've used ChatGPT in the past just to collect like data from a question that I wanted answered, and it compiled all that data for me pretty quickly.
Sweet. That's an awesome use. I don't think I even have that listed. Thanks, Roman. Does anybody else have experience with using any AI or ChatGPT tools? All right. So let's go ahead and start by talking about chatbots. This is probably why this session is being done today and why we're all here today is because of chatbots. Maybe a month or two ago, OpenAI, which is one of the biggest AI companies, released a chatbot tool called ChatGPT that is just leaps and bounds ahead and more advanced than any chatbot tool we had seen so far. It has the capacity to write in a very human-like voice in a very organized and compelling way. And it's sort of sent shockwaves through all sorts of industries, but definitely education, thinking about these questions about like, is this the end of the essay? Why do anything anymore if computers can do it for us? So ChatGPT is probably the biggest consideration right now, and it's probably why we're here. I'm going to start and see if I can do a live demo of ChatGPT. It's a super popular tool, so about half the time I try to use it, it gets overrun, it's at capacity and it doesn't work. And if that's the case, I have a little video recorded myself using it so that we can see what it's like. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new tab, go to just search ChatGPT in my toolbar. It's this top one. OpenAI is the website. If you scroll down, there's a little try ChatGPT. And then I've already logged in as a user. You can log in with your Google account, or you can create a new account with ChatGPT. And then you have this little cursor at the bottom where you can start typing to ChatGPT. So I say hello, and it says, hello, how can I assist you today? And I might say, I am presenting to a group of teachers on how to use you in the classroom. What should I tell them? And then it's going to think about it for a little while. And it says, as a language AI model, I can be helpful for students and teachers in the classroom. Here are some ways: generating writing prompts, providing research assistance, offering language support, enhancing classroom discussion, improving reading comprehension, creating engaging activities. It's important to note that while I can be a useful tool in the classroom, I'm not a substitute for human teachers. Teachers should use me in conjunction with other teaching strategies to provide a well-rounding and engaging learning experience for their students. And that took, 10 seconds or so, 20 seconds for ChatGPT to write. So if you haven't seen it used before, that's just a really short demonstration of sort of the power of this tool. Now, another thing I could do is I can say, great, can you reformat that into a 5-paragraph essay written at a 7th grade writing level? Reformats. And then it's going to go ahead and rewrite that as a 5-paragraph essay. So again, trying to demonstrate sort of why this has sent shockwaves through the education world, because now I have a pretty decent 5-paragraph essay that if I were asking students to write about AI in the classroom, they could certainly copy and paste this into their assignment and turn it in. we'll talk about this a little bit later in the session, but there isn't currently any good way to check for plagiarism with chatbots and ChatGPT, because everything written by the chatbot is an original piece of writing. There's not any piece of work that exists like this on the internet so far, because the chatbot is generating from a vast amount of data and using patterns to format the sentences, and it's always going to be original. So I can click regenerate response, and it's going to do it again in a completely different and unique way. So I could do, you know, as many essays as I want, and they're each going to be completely original. So using traditional plagiarism checkers don't currently work. You'll hear about some that are in development. There's one called, I think it's called ChatZero, that is being developed to try to recognize some of the patterns that ChatGPT uses. But from everything I've seen, it's really not consistent, and it would be a huge shame to, you know, falsely accuse a student of using an AI tool when they're not, because it's really not consistent enough. So that's ChatGPT. What I'm going to talk about next is different ways that you can use it, and then going specifically into how to use it to kind of like get the most out of it. I'm going to go ahead and pause one more time just to see if there are any questions. I've got a brain exploding from Pam. That's pretty amazing stuff.
Emma, I was also thinking, as I told you that I don't know much about this, Grammarly. I didn't really think about the fact that Grammarly, that what I use every day is
Yeah.
I mean,
Totally.
yeah,
It's all around us.
helps me write.
All right. So I also have a video recording of a demo of ChatGPT. If you'll have access to all of these slides at the end, and then you can always share this out later if you want to. So before we get into some ideas about how you might use it, we're going to talk about something called framing. And framing is just a method for trying to get the most out of your interactions with ChatGPT, because once you start using it over and over again, you'll start noticing that it does give you sort of a very basic, almost robotic style of writing. You might have noticed in that essay that we just had him generate and then regenerate it, generate and regenerate. It you know, uses transitions like firstly, secondly, thirdly, and it writes in a very kind of basic formulaic way. That is, unless you know how to really frame it and train it to get it to respond to you or write to you in a way that you want it to. So I have some strategies for getting the most out of your use with ChatGPT. Another quote that I've heard recently that I love is to think of AI chatbots as a very helpful but not very smart assistant. It seems super hyper intelligent, but it is only as good as the instructions that you give it. So the better your instructions are, the better it will do for you. It is very, very helpful if you give it a lot of guidance. And that's what we're going to talk about now. I don't remember what this is. Okay. Here, this is just a short demonstration of me giving it a basic prompt and then giving it a framed prompt. So I asked it to write a short introduction to the country of Spain. It gives a decent but a very kind of bland and basic introduction. It says Spain is a vibrant and culturally rich country located on the Iberian Peninsula in southwestern Europe with a population of 43 million, et cetera, et cetera. So now I'm framing it and I'm saying, act as Ernest Hemingway, I'm an English teacher, and write a short introduction to the country of Spain. So now it's saying Spain is a country that holds a special place in my heart. I've spent many years wandering its streets and soaking up its culture, and I have come to love its passion, its people, its fiery bullfights, its rich history, and so on and so forth. And so this is already a little bit more of a richer response that it's given me just by that teeny bit of framing to respond in a different voice. So when we're starting to look at framing, there's a couple different strategies that you can use. I have a cheat sheet that Pam can drop in the chat box at any time where I've listed these out for you. So you can copy and paste these frames right into the chat box or make a copy of the document and use it as you write your own prompts. But the first one is called Prepping the AI. PREP is an acronym, P-R-E-P, stands for prompt it, give it a role, give it explicit instructions, and then give it parameters. So if you can see the example on the right-hand side, the prompt I gave ChatGPT is to create a paragraph about the benefits of Minecraft in education. The role is you are a student arguing why you should be able to use Minecraft for school projects. The explicit instructions were to write a 100-word or less paragraph, include 3 or more reasons why Minecraft is beneficial in education, and address the opposing arguments. The parameters I gave it is this is for a 7th grade language arts class. The reading level should be at a 7th grade level. So that's the PREP, and you can see I even listed those out as topics. You can totally do that right into the chatbot. And then it gave me this paragraph that is exactly what I asked for. I use this paragraph for my students when we're talking about persuasive writing. And specifically, we're looking at addressing the other side of the argument. So I might use one paragraph like this to teach them and show them how it addresses the other side of the argument. Then I might have it regenerate that response for a different topic. And then again, and use those for formative and summative assessments to see if my students can then address the other side of the argument or identify that in their own writing. So that's the acronym PREP to help you frame those parameters. Prompt it, give it a role, give it explicit instructions and clear parameters. Another way that you might frame it is through this request. It's pretty much the same thing, just with a slightly different way to say it. Starting with the role, I want you to act as. Again, this is like the, who is the author? Do you want ChatGPT to be writing as if they were a student? Do you want them to be writing as if they were an expert? Do you want them to be writing as if they were a specific author? So again, we've got a 1st and 2nd grade teacher here. I want you to act as a 1st grade teacher. I will give you a set of instructions. You are going to write 10 sentences appropriate for a 2nd grade reading level about a cat and an owl, right? You will give me those 10 sentences. Each one will have a noun and a verb in them. And then my first request is write the 10 sentences at a 1st grade reading level, including a noun and a verb and a cat and an owl. All right, I think I'll pause there with these first 2 because these are kind of the basics in framing, and give everybody who is at their computer a little bit of time to try using one or more of these. So if you see in the chat box, Pam has pulled up 2 things for you. The first one is that cheat sheet. Go ahead and open up that cheat sheet. And you'll see up here, the prep or the request parameters. Go ahead and copy one of those, whichever one makes the most sense to you. And then the second link she gave you is for ChatGPT. Go ahead and open that up. Again, you have to scroll down to where it says try ChatGPT. And then either you'll have to log in or sign up. Again, if you're signing up for the first time and you use a Google account, you can sign up just right with your Google account. If you scroll down, you have that option to log in with Google, log in with Microsoft. And then once you get that little cursor at the bottom, go ahead and paste your frame into there. And then at the moment, we haven't talked about like different ways you can use this. Anything fun. You can ask it to tell you a story about a pickle who travels through time. You can ask it to write you a recipe. You can ask it to sing you a song, write you a poem. Really anything just kind of fun and silly and creative while you play. So I'm going to give about 5 or so minutes on the timer for you to play with this, and then I'll call you back in about 5. All right, that's 10 more seconds on our 5 minutes. If you had a little chance to play with ChatGPT and framing to get a response, go ahead and wrap up and come back to the Zoom. And if you are willing, let us know if you were able to get a response from ChatGPT. And then if you want, you could share with us what your prompt was and what your response was. So I'll go ahead and start. My prompt was, I asked it to write a song about Sundays and the weekend coming to an end. I'm kind of not looking forward to work, but feeling really good about the weekend. And this is the song that ChatGPT wrote for me. So I'm going to go ahead and throw both of those in the chat box for you to see. I also then ask it to rewrite it as a rap in the style of Tupac Shakur. And it did okay. So here are the 2 things that I played around with. If you are willing, feel free to drop in the chat box what you asked of it. Or not. If you don't feel like it, it's totally fine. I'll just keep my little eye peeled for that chat box and see if anybody decides to drop what they played around with. Oh, nice. Did it have a good response, Christina?
Yes, I actually just got home not too long ago, so I managed to ask it a question, and it had a great like sensitive and understanding response. Like it was telling me like, oh, it's hard. It could be hard, but you have to set your clear expectations. So it was like I was talking to someone who was like empathizing with me. So it was funny but helpful.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly like I'm going to show everybody like a lot of like really practical ways to use it, but there's some really fun, like people have spent hours just like talking to it and getting some really interesting responses, like as if it were a person, which is interesting too. All right, so that's the start of framing. Prompt it, give it a role, give it clear expectations, let it know like the voice you want it to be using, who you want it to be acting as, and the specific parameters, like how long do you want the response to be? Do you want it to be in bullet points? Do you want things to be italicized? Do you want them to be bolded? Do you want complex or simple sentences, right? Anything you can think of being clear and explicit in that. 2 other potential ways for you to use and frame in ChatGPT. This is a prompt. Again, you can just copy and paste this straight into ChatGPT, but this is a way to get ChatGPT to prompt you. So if you're feeling too lazy to like use the PREP acronym and write it all out. And beforehand, you can copy and paste this into the chat box. And more like Christina did is like have a conversation with it and just get it to prompt you with what you want it to say. So this prompt says, you are a chat generation robot, which it is. You need to gather information about the user's goals, objectives, examples, and preferred output, and other relevant context. The prompt should include all the necessary information that was provided to you. Ask follow-up questions to the user until you're confident you can produce a perfect prompt. Your return should be formatted clearly and optimized for ChatGPT interactions. Start by asking the user goals, desired output, and any additional information needed. So that's just going to get it to ask you the questions that you want it to ask you. So you could always start with this. Just grab this, copy it. And this is in the cheat sheet too. Actually, I can just pull the cheat sheet up and show you the process. This one. So here's that in the cheat sheet. It says prompt you. You can just go ahead and copy that whole thing, go to ChatGPT, enter it. Oh. And of course, it's not working right now. Whenever it does this, I always just close it and open it again. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, and then it's going to say, before I begin, can you tell me a little bit about your goals and objectives for this conversation? Some examples of the preferred output you're looking for. I say, great. My goal is to create a story book for my 4th grade class about behavior. And then it's going to say, I'd be happy to assist you about that. Can you provide additional information that can better understand you? What kind of behaviors do you want to focus on? Is there any specific message you want? How many pages or chapters? Do you have specific themes? And so I can just respond to its prompt rather than kind of like having to think that through myself. So I can say behaviors, raising hands, messages, be respectful to the teacher. I feel like this is where I'm at in the year. I'm just like, please be nice to me. Let's just do like 12 pages. And ChatGPT can't do illustrations, so I'm not sure why it's asking that, or like can't do it yet. So I could say no illustrations, but can you describe what you would illustrate in parentheses? All right, let's see how it goes. Great. It's just going to clarify. And it's giving me an outline, which is kind of cool. Solution, positive outcomes, challenges, conclusion. And I could say, great. Please write this story. And we'll see what it does. There was a 4th grade class full of curious and lively students. The teacher, Miss Green, loved teaching them, but had trouble keeping the class organized. And so it's going to start writing our book about behavior for your 4th grade class. This could be even a fun activity to like do with the class and just say to the class, like, what behaviors should we ask it to write about? And like have them tell you like, oh, we really need to not talk while the teacher's talking, or like, you know. So as we start to kind of bridge into that part, like thinking about how you can actually use this with your students, and then it's really fun to see it work live, you know, and read along as it's producing the content. And then of course you can get more creative and you can tell it to be like, all right, the class is going to be a class full of salamanders and, you know, whatever else you can think up and create. When this is finished, I'll pop that in the chat box for you, Christine, if you want to use that story with your class. So that was some framing on getting ChatGPT to prompt you so that you don't have to think through all of that. You just use that prompt every time, and you should get something that you're, pretty happy with. The last one is having ChatGPT frame as you. So if you're going to be using this to do any writing yourself, we're going to look later about like how you could maybe use it to write some emails or something like that. You definitely want it to write in a voice that sounds like you, because it's strange if we're all going to go about in the future just like sounding like robots. So this is how you do it to get it to frame as you, is you start by giving ChatGPT a sample of text that you've already written, and then you ask it to analyze it for style, voice, and tone. So if you have an email that you've already written, you copy and paste that text into ChatGPT, and you just say, can you analyze this for style, voice, and tone? And then the ChatGPT will probably say like, yeah, this is friendly and informative and professional, and it'll give you a lot of like verbiage. And then you're going to take that response and you're going to put it right into a frame and say, can you write an email in the voice and style of a friendly, informative, professional fourth grade teacher who is, and then you go on with the rest of your prompts. And then of course, I always do a lot of like very heavy editing on what ChatGPT gives me. But I gotta say, having ChatGPT as a starting point for my writing is really, really helpful, because I think we all know that sometimes the hardest thing when you're writing is just like beginning and like staring at the blank page. So starting with ChatGPT, giving you a prompt, and then editing it to make it really sound like you and to say what you want it to say, I think is a helpful place to start. Any questions about those frames? I know that kind of took a while, but that really is the meat of like, if you're going to use this, this is how to use it so that you're getting more out of it than just kind of a little bit of fun. Sweet. Okay. And then this, again, this is in our cheat sheet, I believe. This is just the copy and paste text for how you could ask it to frame as you. You're an AI system that's been trained to analyze the below text for style of voice, and then use that to create a voice paragraph. So that's how you would frame it, to write as you. We're going to jump into just a bunch of examples of how you might use this in the classroom, and then we're going to look at one more AI tool before we wrap up. So using it to produce writing samples, I already showed you the Minecraft one, but I've already started using this a ton with my students. I used to waste a ton of time looking for like the perfect paragraph that demonstrated exactly what I was trying to showcase for my students. And then I wanted it to be kind of like interesting and fun and at the right reading level. And I spent a ton of time looking for that. Now I can ask ChatGPT, if we're looking at using transition words, I just like, hey, can you write a paragraph that uses transition words or these transition words, and make it about a ferret who can do kung fu? And then it's always something kind of funny or interesting. And if you're like, I can't think of funny, interesting things, say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me 10 things that are weird and quirky and a middle schooler would find wonderful, and it will do that for you. So lately I've been taking these writing samples, and I always do 3. One for the direct instruction, then one for a formative assessment at the end, and then one for a summative assessment like at the start of the next class. And they're just pretty much the same with different prompts. Again, I teach slightly older students, but for essay analysis, I use a backwards design. So when we're starting to look at how to construct our own essays, we have ChatGPT write an essay, and then we pull it apart and say, okay, what did it do here? Which paragraph is the introduction? Did it use an interesting hook? What strategy did it use? Did it summarize the rest of the paragraph in the introduction? Where did it do that? And I sort of have them pull it apart into a graphic organizer. So instead of starting with a graphic organizer and then writing, we start with the essay and we pull it backwards to kind of dissect the essay, because it's very, very good at writing a 5-paragraph essay, like a very classic 5-paragraph essay. We also use it for source and information analysis. ChatGPT is, I would say, mostly factual, but it definitely makes some stuff up sometimes. You might have seen on the news, ChatGPT spinning a whole yarn about the first woman president. And it talks about Hillary Clinton winning the 2016 election. And that is a whole thing. So we ask it to provide informative texts and cite its sources. And then we go and we fact check those facts and see, can we find this on reliable sources? And that's just a really great skill anyways. The other thing is ChatGPT can't currently cite sources, which feels like a really great learning lesson. It will give you very credible looking sources. So it'll often like cite Britannica and like real websites, but it'll give you like a bogus URL that doesn't actually exist. And that's kind of shocking for the students the first time when you click on that link and it's like, oh, this doesn't actually exist. It didn't get this information from here. It is pulling information from somewhere, but not from where it says it is. So we go and we try to find where that information came from. Is it factual? Is it credible? ChatGPT does a great job giving lesson plan ideas. I have not used like a cut and dry lesson plan from ChatGPT so far, but if I'm kind of stumped about like, all right, I need to teach this tomorrow and I'm like not really sure how to do it, I'll often say, hey, can you give me a lesson plan on this standard? And then I'll say something like, and make it a game, or like make illustration involved somehow. And it often will give you like some pretty great ideas. I have no idea about your district, but if they require you to submit lesson plans, 100% this is the first place I would start using it, is I would just have it generate all of those and send those off, because you don't need to spend your time doing that. We mentioned a little bit about email templates. ChatGPT is really good at writing emails. As Christina found out, it can be very empathetic. So especially with difficult parents, you can prompt it or prep it with the frame and the situation, ask it to use a very like sympathetic, understanding voice. You know, you can ask it to sandwich your response between praise and you can even just create stock email templates for certain situations that you can then use again and again. This one, I have a little example to show you. I have not tried this yet with my own students, but there's a teacher, a tech educator who I follow, who has had quite a bit of success generating feedback on student work with ChatGPT, starting with a rubric. The other thing I would say about this is like, obviously I'm not advocating that we use AI to do like all the grading on student work, because obviously as our teachers, we need to understand how our students are doing with their work so that we can then follow up and do interventions and make sure students are learning what they need to learn. But I know as a best practice, leaving specific positive feedback on student work is a great practice that sometimes I just don't have time for. And I think AI tools like ChatGPT could be really great at generating that really specific positive praise that then I could use to just kind of like bolster my students' self-esteem on their work. So this is a teacher named Donnie Piercy. He prompted it like this. He said, read this rubric. I'm about to have you grade some student work using it. Explain to me why you grade each piece as you do. Do you understand? And then he just copy and pasted his rubric for this opinion piece that he had his fifth graders write. They obviously use this system, novice, apprentice, and then this is the rubric for what each of those looks like, then proficient and distinguished. And again, the more specific, the better, is the very specific criteria for the student writing, clear opinion, distinguished level because it's clear, believable, addresses the topic very well, et cetera, et cetera. And then he pasted the student work into it. So this is one of his fifth graders' piece of writing. And this is the rest of it. So it looks like this little essay. And this was ChatGPT's response. It said, based on the following on-demand opinion rubric for fifth graders, I would grade this student work as proficient. And then it explains why this piece of writing has a clear opinion, addresses the topic, about whether students should be paid for doing the schoolwork. So it's specifically citing the student's work. The writer provided some reasons to support their opinion, but they're not very clear and could benefit from more elaboration. There are no sources used to support the opinion. The writing has a clear structure to develop the opinion with an interesting conclusion, but the transitions could be improved, and so on and so forth. So that's a pretty specific piece of feedback that ChatGPT wrote, and certainly more than I'm able to do personally. So again, I definitely don't advocate for teachers outsourcing all of their grading to AI, but if we can enhance the student's experience while still making sure, right, that we're kind of have our finger on the pulse of what's going on, I think that's awesome. I mentioned this earlier, but just using ChatGPT to give you some creative infusion of ideas. I try to think of things like a bathtub full of gummy bears or kung fu ferrets, but sometimes my mind runs dry, and that's been really fun, especially for creative writing, asking ChatGPT just to give you all sorts of outlandish prompts for your students to write about. And then last but not least, Pam mentioned Grammarly earlier. Grammarly is already an awesome AI editing tool. ChatGPT is fantastic at editing, especially copy editing. So if you're already at that kind of last stage with your students, allowing them to use spell checkers and Grammarly and all sorts of stuff, you may as well empower them to use AI tools like ChatGPT to paste their text into and say, hey, can you edit this for spelling and grammar? A really fun thing to do after you have it do that copy edit is say, how many revisions did you make in that? And it will tell you, I made 34 edits, or I made 76 edits. And then you can say, can you give me some examples of those? And you can kind of use it as a teaching tool or as a learning tool as well to see what you need to work on. All right, that took pretty much the whole time. We've got 4 minutes left. And I just want to kind of like run through the rest of this so that you know what's in the resources for you to do some further exploration. There are some really great AI image tools on the web. OpenAI's tool, so the same company that does ChatGPT, does one called DALL-E, and it's probably the coolest one. You would do the same kind of framing that you do with ChatGPT, but it will spit out images for you. So if you wanted to then take your storybook about 4th grade behavior and make an image for each page, you would prompt it, give it a role. So in this case, I said, create an oil painting. Imagine you are Gustav Klimt. Honestly, I Googled that. I was like, who does oil paintings? So imagine you're Gustav Klimt and create an oil painting that represents the dramatic irony of Romeo and Juliet. Be sure to show the poison. And this is what DALL-E spit out. It often gives you like 4 options. And then you can download those or copy and paste those. So again, with your students, if you guys write a story, you could then come up with the prompts for each page. What do we want this to look like? Great way to learn about artists too. Like, in what style do we want this to look like? Pointillism or like Salvador Dali or whatever else. This could also help you illustrate teaching points if you're having trouble finding the image that you want. So I just asked it to imagine it was medical artists and draw an anatomically correct eyeball and include the pupil and the iris and the cornea. And these are the images that it gave to me that I could use for my presentation. This is just a game that I thought of that you could use. You could use DALL-E to play telephone. You could start with a secret prompt, show the students the image generated from it, and then ask them to tell you what they thought the prompt was. So in this case, we've got this crazy image here. The actual prompt was, in various artistic styles, depict a carnival in which all the animals are escaping from a fire. But that could just be a way for them to kind of generate story, look for evidence in what do we see in there, right? There's a wagon, there's like like really kind of horrific animals. Sometimes the image generator is like very strange. But you could use that to kind of play a game and use it to look at evidence in text. And then you can just use it to empower students to create their own representations of their own stories or their own ideas. Few other places that you have already seen or you will see AI in EdTech in Google Forms. If you've ever seen it suggest to you or change your question type, that's already AI working, and Google is going to be doing this more and more. Practice Sets is a new tool within Google Classroom. They have AI infused, giving hints to students about various subjects that you're teaching. I have a whole post on my blog about how to use Practice Sets with the AI. Canva, if you're familiar with the graphic design tool, has their own image generator. So this was a drawing of a gorilla eating a snack that I could then use on my poster on my presentation. That was AI generated. They also have like a chat bot, which isn't available for the education version. So I sort of skipped it in this presentation. Parlay is a discussion tool that you may or may not have heard of. And they now have an AI generated discussion prompt where you can kind of give the topic that you want your students to discuss, and it will spit out different questions at various grade levels for you that you could use for discussion. Hello History is an app you can download on your phone, and it uses chatbots in the style and voice of different historical figures. So if you teach history, especially for those of you who teach elementary, you can have it on the screen and your students can have a conversation with those historical figures. Character AI is another one that does this. It's like maybe not as official as Hello History, but you can watch this video back and see my conversation with Shakespeare, and we were talking all about to be or not to be, and whether or not that is in fact the question. And I asked what that meant to Shakespeare, and he told me his thoughts in kind of existential way. And then last few things looking forward, it's important to note that all this AI is created by humans, and humans have bias. So AI has bias just like humans do. It's an important thing to teach your students that, ultimately that the machines are not, any more evolved than the humans that made them. ChatGPT 4, there's been a lot of talk about that. There's going to be some image components with it. Google is releasing Bard. Microsoft is releasing their own AI. There's going to be more integration in all the EdTech tools you already use. I imagine we'll see chatbot tutors in education and different AI grading systems. So that's all to say that we're definitely not going back. We're just going to see more and more AI. And if we circle back to that prompt we said at the beginning, those of us who are going to do the best are going to be the ones who are figuring out how to use it in conjunction with the work that we already do. So I hope that this was a helpful introduction to you. I'm going to have Pam drop in the chat a couple links. One is the resource doc for everything we did today. That includes the slides from this session. It includes that cheat sheet that you used, so you don't have to save that. That'll be there. And then all of my stuff, my website, I have a monthly newsletter where I'll be talking a lot about what I'm doing with AI and learning, but also all sorts of EdTech stuff, a blog, and then I have some like free resources linked there, as well as all my social media. And yeah, that's a little information about my school. You might not be interested in that. The last session I talked about my school more. And then there's a link to the evaluation. So I know we kind of ran a teeny bit over on time. I appreciate your patience. There's just so much to know. If you've got everything you need and you are ready to be done with the day, thank you for being here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stick around for a minute. And that's all.
Thank you so much, Emma. And thank you everybody for being here and for your time. I know I learned quite a bit, and I was over there doing my own thing, researching things. So if you need anything, let us know. I can hang out for a couple minutes. And if you are having any issues with the links, let me know and I can send them your way again. It's quite a rabbit hole to go down, Emma.
Oh my gosh. It really is. There's a lot.
It's so fun.
Was anybody able to open the resource doc link? Cecilia said that she was not able to.
Oh, not the last link. Okay, let's try that.
Same here. I was able to open all of them except which one was it?
I wonder if there is a domain restriction. Let me see if I can share it as a different link. Give me 1 second. Or, you know what we can just do? I'll copy and paste everything. Oh, but those aren't hyperlinked now. Oh, a couple people are on that resources doc.
Was it the last one, everybody, that where it says Emma and the Twitter access? Was that the link? That was the last one, I think, in my list.
I dropped another link to the resources. And maybe that one will work if that was what people were having a hard time with.
Oh, I was able to open all of them except the Empowered EDU one.
Oh, okay.
Is
Oh.
it just like a website I can type in?
Let me give you a different link. Here we go. That's my website.
Okay, I'll write it down.
And you should be able to click that link now. I think the other one was an old domain. All right.